Welcome back to the channel. My name is Rob and today we're going to be painting some word bearers. It's been a bit of a word bearers, so it will be a little bit of a word bearers month this month, as I'm going to be doing the new Saturnine demonic terminators on the Patreon. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to do the word bearers scheme, a metallic scheme based largely off of how the original Forge World Studio team kind of did theirs, just with a little bit of my own twist on it. And I think it's a little bit simpler as well, but it's been a little bit neglected from myself. I did a Rhino probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and since then I haven't touched the word bearers. I do love the scheme. I think it's amazing, and I'm always keen to, whenever I see a word bearers army, it's keen to start my own force, and this is definitely intensifies the feeling of wanting to do my own word bearers force. Whether I'll get round to it this year, probably not, but definitely in 2026 I'll definitely consider it. So here you can see the actual models. So it's a nice dark red, arterial red, and they are very far away from Blood Angels. I really like a metallic word bearers scheme. I think that for me that really encapsulates the Legion really nicely, and I think that it really harps back to the colour plates from the Black Books and what we see within the artwork as well. And I think one of the great things about doing a metallic scheme is that it's forgiving in the sense that you don't need to do really edge highlighting. You can do just with some kind of like silver chipping and things like that, but it's not necessary. So I think that as a scheme it's fairly straightforward. It looks good. It's forgiving, and actually in order to paint these kinds of marines, actually your airbrush skills do not need to be of a particularly high standard, just because of the way that we are not really doing any highlighting at all with this model except for kind of on the black, and actually you can probably do that just by leaving it off the model. So we start off with a base coat of mithril, and then we're going to use True Blood. Now, True Blood is actually an effect paint, and it's what you would use for kind of like blood splatters. It's what you'd use on swords and things like that. Flick it on or sponge it on. It's the equivalent of blood for the blood god, but I'm actually using it through the airbrush, and I'm just thinned it down with a little bit of thinner. It goes through the airbrush quite nicely. What I would say is that if you're doing an entire army of this, like 3K or something like that, you're probably going to need about 10 bottles of True Blood. Like the coverage on it, you need probably about 3 coats to get a really deep, decent kind of like red color. And just as an aside as well, if you're doing or considering Thousand Suns, this is how I would do Thousand Suns as well. Like you're not dealing with any of the clear paints on the market like Tamiya's and things like that. It's all acrylic. And as a result, it's a little bit nicer to work with, and I think personally a little bit easier to work with as well. But as I say, if you are looking to do a Thousand Suns scheme, just apply the True Blood and you're there. I've done one previously, a Thousand Suns console before, but this kind of shows off kind of what it would look like just on generic infantry, whereas there's lots of kind of stuff all over the console, so it's difficult to kind of sometimes register the red. But I think that this looks, as I say, quite nice for a Thousand Suns scheme. But we want to turn it into a word bearer scheme. We don't want to do a Thousand Suns scheme. So what we're going to do is just tint this red color with Murder Scene to give it that really dark, arterial look that we associate with the word bearers. And what I've done is I've thinned this in with 1 part Murder Scene and 1 part Speed Paint Medium, and then I'm just putting it straight through the airbrush, no other thinner. I'm essentially using the Speed Paint Medium as a thinner, and then I'm applying 2 thin coats all over the model to give it that word bearers armor, arterial red look to it. And then that's it. That is the red for our word bearers. There's nothing more to it than that. Now you will have noticed that I've not done kind of like a dark silver and then a light silver. That I think is on purpose. I wanted the I was conscious that I wanted the red to be as bright as I could possibly make it, and not having kind of done this scheme before, I was like, I'll just stick to a really light silver base coat of mithril. If you're doing tanks though, I would highly recommend that you do some kind of like dark silver to light silver fade. And then finally, I just painted with matte black the backpack, the bolter casing and the shoulder pads, and then the faceplate. And you can just see me going in here with uniform grey, just keeping it really, really tight, just doing some highlights. I would highly recommend you actually do this off of the model. I already had the models kind of like good to go. I built some and then decided not to use them for something, and I was like, you know, I'll rip the heads off and then add some word bearers heads to them. So that's why everything's attached. But if I were you, I would leave the shoulder pads and backpacks off, and then do this, because you might find that the overspray just kind of like affects the red. I've got a very, very precise airbrush here. I'm using a custom Micron, which is basically like the Ferrari of airbrushes. So it's very, very precise. It kind of like is a surgical scalpel of a airbrush. So just bear that in mind. You know, I would recommend leaving them off, but if you actually just can't be bothered, then you can do this process as long as you're careful, or you can mask it off or whatever. But as I say, this is just uniform grey, just thinned with a little bit thinner, and then just using this as a bit of a grey highlight. And again, nothing more than that. Like I've tried to keep the scheme really simple and really straightforward. And when I think back to that, like the grey of the word bearers colour scheme, like originally before they took on the mantle of the, you know, the red mantle, I just think of it as grey. Like I don't think of it as like a stealthy black grey or blue grey or whatever. I just see it as a pretty solid standard uniform grey, and this is what I've used here as a result. So next up, we're going to use plate mail metal. And then we're going to do our highlighting with our, we're going to do our base coats with our silvers here. I've decided not to use any coppers or any golds or any brass or anything like that. You can absolutely use that if you want to. But I've got a very distinctive look in my head of how the word bearers should look. And basically it's red, black and silver. If you choose to add kind of like bronzes or things like that into it, then go for it. They're really good to kind of like add to a patina effect. To just add to the malevolence and the evil to them. But for me, red, black, silver, it really sets them apart, and it sets them apart from particularly Blood Angels, who share many of the like aspects of the scheme, you know, but you probably just do the trim in gold, right? And then you would end up with kind of Blood Angels. You'll also notice that I've used a Mark 6 head. I've been using a lot of the Mark 6 heads recently on the Mark 2 bodies, and I must say I really, really like how they look. Like, I know that some people won't like the mix and match, but I think that believe it or not, the Mark 6 heads really work well. The Salamanders one in particular works really, really nicely. You can see here, this is just base coated with the silvers now. And this is basically, once you've done this, you've done 60-70% of the work here. This is why I think it's quite good. If you're just starting out on airbrushing in particular, as long as you leave the pads and the shoulder and the backpack off, like I actually think this is a really good one to start an airbrushing journey with if you've just bought an airbrush, because the red is just straightforward. You know, even if you wanted to do your tanks just with those two colours, you know, with no fade of any kind, then this might be the way to go about doing it. In terms of the transfers, I've glossed the model, so that's why it's so shiny at the moment. The speed paint does knock back the shine of the model, so don't be alarmed when you have that True Blood on. It's really shiny, and then you apply the speed paint over it, and then it kind of goes a little bit matte. That's perfectly normal. We'll finish the model in satin, and then that will kind of bring everything back to where we need it to be. Word bearers, of course, have lots of like iconography over them. In my Rhino tutorial that I did some time ago, as I said, I did kind of like overlapping reds over the kind of like the white scripts to just kind of have it as an off red. Here I've just gone for the just the white script over the red, and I think again it looks really, really nice. There's all sorts of things you can do with word bearers though. I think the potential is really great. And then I'm just adding some chipping here. I've gloss varnished the model before I've applied the transfers, because it helps the transfers adhere over a smooth surface. And then the transfers weren't from the Forge World or the old Forge World transfer sheet. These were from the Betrayal of Calth box set, and they're nice and vibrant and nice and bright. If I were to do a Word Bearers army, I would definitely look to see if I could get my hands at any more of these, because they are really, really decent. And I quite like I didn't think I'd like the orange on the other side of the pad, but actually I think it works really well. Right, let's have a discussion about the oil. So if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know I'm a keen enthusiast for oil paints, just because I think they're basically quite user friendly. Believe it or not, they're also quite forgiving if you make mistakes with them as well. But that's really the reason why I use them, and they create kind of like this very kind of like grim, dark, grimy vibe to them. However, what we're not using is like a grimy paint. We're actually going to use like a turquoise colour here, and you might be wondering why that is. Why am I pin washing with a turquoise colour? And the reason why is, number one, partly because of contrast, but number two, I thought it would look cool, but number three is that I wanted a sense that the armor's almost corrupted, like the word bearers are corrupted, and that kind of having kind of like a verdigris effect on the armor, just within the crevices and the cracks, kind of is a good way to demonstrate this as well. Like if you're doing this on like walkers like the Maragal or Contemptors and stuff like that, this will work really well as well. So I just wanted to give it a try. It won't be for everybody, and if this is kind of like turquoise colour isn't for you, then I would just recommend using a lamp black. But the colour that I've created here is a combination of turquoise lights, which is Aplon 502, Viridian Hue, which is a Winsor & Newton colour, and then just a dash of black just to knock it back and just to desaturate it as well. And then I've used this as a pin wash all over the model, and as you can see here, it's just kind of accentuating the panels just with an interesting colour, I think, and just kind of suggests that evilness and maliciousness and malice that you'd expect from, and taintedness, I guess, that you'd expect from the word bearers, which I think works really, really nicely. Again, as I say, this will not be for everybody, and it perhaps looks a little bit brighter on the camera than it does kind of in the hand. In the hand it's quite a subtle effect, but I quite like it, and sometimes it's just good to experiment. Like if I was just to use lamp black or burnt umber on everything, then I think that it would just be samey, but doing something like this, I think, you know, it's good for you guys to see what you can do with oils, and if you're brave enough to kind of like do this kind of thing, I think it works quite nicely and works quite well as well. Definitely, you can use this on tanks if you want to as well, this kind of like this oil wash, but I haven't done it on tanks myself, so it would be interesting to see what that would look like and how it would translate as well. So next up, I've added some more black into this mix, and I'm going to focus on the silvers now. So before I was just really focusing on the red armor panels and the black armor plate. Now I'm just going in with all the silvers, and you might be thinking, you know, it's kind of like this greenish patinaed verdigris effect. Like that's pretty unusual. We wouldn't really see that often in like Warhammer. No, probably not. But also think about like your taps and stuff like that. Sometimes, you know, if you've got a tap, they can start to oxidize and they can start to go green as well. So it's not, you know, it's not impossible for these things to work this way. Like it doesn't think like silvers don't just need to be rusty, and steels don't just need to be rusty. We can weather them in kind of like interesting ways, and again, it just kind of like fits that kind of ghoulish and ghastly kind of like vibe to the word bearers that we want to create. I did do a Lorgar Aurelian tutorial not too long ago, last year or maybe the year before that as well. So if you want to check that out, you can, if you're looking to do the whole gamut of kind of infantry vehicles and Primarchs as well. But you can see here I'm just applying this over the model, and then after this we just leave it to dry. Didn't leave it long, probably about an hour. And then I'm just cleaning it up with a clean cotton wool bud, a Q-tip. I've not dipped this in any white spirits because the oils still look quite fresh on them, so it's just quite easy to wipe them away. You can see the oils being removed and on the cotton wool bud on the Q-tip there. So all the raised areas, I'm just wiping away any excess oils, and this is why I say they're quite forgiving. You know, if we had used like a wash or a oil or a wash or a tone or something like that, that we typically use in Warhammer, I wouldn't be able to wipe this away. Whereas using oils, they take a long period of time to dry, so it means that they're a bit more forgiving if you do make mistakes. And then obviously doing it this way, just hitting the raised areas, it just leaves behind in all the nooks and the crannies and the crevices our oil colour. And actually the ores are not, like, the fact that it's a turquoise we've used isn't too noticeable here. And then finally what we're going to do, we are going to use a satin varnish on this. So this will get us back somewhere between where we started with the that speed paint over the top and then that gloss varnish. It will hit somewhere in the middle with a satin varnish, and this will just bring some of the luster back, and then it will also give us a suggestion that it's a metallic plate, which it is a metallic plate, but it needs to look metallic again, so finishing it with a satin varnish is a good idea. And this is fine to go over the kind of everything. If you wanted to do like the black parts in a matte, then you could do. You just go in with a brush and just paint those in matte varnish. But I don't think there's any need. I think it's just all lacquered with a satin varnish. I think is absolutely fine. And then we just leave that to dry for a bit. And then what you can see me doing here is just adding some liquid pigments. This is a light clay colour by AK, and then the actual kind of like texture paint that I've used is volcanic earth. And I applied the volcanic earth, just left it to dry, and applying the liquid pigments. I often use liquid pigments in my tutorials just because they're really easy and straightforward to use. I really like the look. They're very kind of like got that Heresy aesthetic to them. And I would highly recommend using them just because they don't make that much of a mess. That's partly why I use them in videos, because I'm not faffing around with a tray with weathering powders in, which can be a bit messy. But I think that you probably want to avoid things like reds and oranges for the word bearers, because you've already got red plate. I wouldn't use reds for like blood angels, for example, but something kind of like sandy or light or neutral in browns or tones I think would work really, really nicely. This is just, this goes on quite dark, but it dries quite light, and I guess it kind of reminds me of kind of like Colchis and how I imagine the sands of Colchis to be. And this is the models finished. All done with the black rim done, and as you can see, really frightening, really malevolent. After the satin varnish, I didn't do any kind of like highlighting or anything like that. Like the oils are doing all of the heavy lifting for me here, but you can see that kind of like wiping away any excess kind of brings out some of the highlights, and the satin varnish just gives it a whole kind of like shine of its own, and I think it looks really good. Like, and just for basic infantry, like tabletop infantry, you don't need to do any more than that. I've just gone and added a little bit of pizzazz with some green glowing eyes that you can do, or you can do it however you want. I think the green works really well because again it suggests like malevolence and evilness to it. But it's up to you how you would want to finish the eyes and do the eyes. Anyway guys, thanks ever so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and just a huge thank you to my patrons for supporting me with all my videos. And if you want to sign up for Patreon, I'd really, really appreciate it. It's £4 a month, and you get extra tutorials and a Q&A from me, and also a big thank you to the Army Painter for supporting these videos as well. Without my patrons and without the Army Painter, I'm not sure I'd produce as many tutorials as I do, and I think that in reality I probably wouldn't produce any. So thank you ever so much guys. I really, really appreciate the support, and as I say, if you want to support me, then just make sure you go check out the Patreon, leave a comment and here, and don't forget to like and subscribe as well. So thanks ever so much guys, and I shall see you on the next one.